I'm Matt McClure.
And I'm Francesca Maxime, and this is Currents.
The Diocese of Brooklyn announces church closings. We visit one of them to get reaction.
What can we do to keep this building open?
I'm feeling very sad this morning, not because of the church closing, but it's what is happening to our church community.
And one of those overseeing the process sits down with us to put it in context.
The church is always more than a building. As strongly as our attachment is to a building, it is the community. It's a living organism.
Plus, 50 years after fleeing communist Cuba, friends reunite.
It was a very traumatic experience because we grew up as brothers and sisters.
Well, good evening, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. It was news that came as a shock to some Brooklyn parishioners. 2 churches in the diocese will be closed. 3 others will merge with neighboring parishes.
The changes will take place at the end of January. It's all part of the reconfiguration process that's going on in the diocese. And we went to one parish that is on the chopping block. It's Our Lady of Montserrat in South Williamsburg, where emotions ran high as parishioners heard the news. For parishioners at this South Williamsburg church, news that their spiritual home will soon close its doors stirred up emotions and led to plenty of questions.
What can we do to keep this building open?
Open your books to this church. Why do you refuse?
Escrito en el reporte de las finanzas. Ahí está. Es un libro abierto.
Our Lady of Montserrat will close on January 31st, 2011, but it won't be the only one in the diocese to do so. The Church of St. Edward the Confessor in Fort Greene will also shut its doors. 3 others will merge with nearby parishes. The parish of St. Lucy and St. Patrick in Clinton Hill will merge with the parish of Mary of Nazareth. St. Gregory the Great Parish in Crown Heights will merge with nearby St. Matthew's Parish. And St. Ignatius, also in Crown Heights, will merge with the Church of St. Francis of Assisi and St. Blaise. Although the news shocked some parishioners at Sunday Mass this weekend, the diocese says these are not rash or thoughtless decisions. The closings are part of a process called Christ Jesus Our Hope, otherwise known as the restructuring plan for the diocese. A panel of clergy and lay leaders has been reviewing the financial and pastoral state of every Brooklyn parish for months. At a priest convocation in October 2009, before the process began, Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio told us changes were coming.
The recession affects all parts of society, and the church is part of society. The church is people. And as people have less money to give, the church will, be affected by it.
Just last week, Auxiliary Bishop Frank Caggiano said budget problems were not the only concern.
Congregation of Montserrat has changed over the years, as all of our congregations have. But the demographics of the area have changed, and therefore there are many who come to Montserrat who may not necessarily live geographically within the parish.
But just because some of them may travel to get there doesn't mean that the process is any less painful for the parishioners we spoke with at Our Lady of Montserrat.
I've been coming to this church for many years. It was a shock.
Under the guise of saying that there's a financial situation going on in the church, that they've also are using that opportunity to really shut down churches that they want to shut down.
There's a lot of elderly people that attend Mass here, and it's a shame for us to be scattered all over the place with no direction.
This is the only place the youth in this neighborhood has any kind of a hope. This is the only place, the only church that does anything for young people.
The church's outreach to the youth of South Williamsburg was something that especially hit home for one parishioner.
You know, the little church that this is here, it means a lot. It means a lot to me, and if this church closes, then my son is going to be lost. He's going to be lost because he's not going to believe.
And the pastor says one thing everyone will miss about Our Lady of Montserrat is the sense of community.
Les decía que es una pena y ciertamente aquí había una pequeña comunidad bien integrada, pequeña, pero había una comunidad. Ahora hay que trabajar en un proceso para que se integren a la nueva comunidad parroquial. Eso no es fácil, pero será posible con la ayuda de Dios.
And for more on the parish closings in the diocese, including more interviews with Brooklyn church leaders, go to worldwideweb.christjesusourhope.org.
All right, well, stay tuned. When we come back, I'll sit down with one of the men who is deeply involved with all of the changes that are taking place. He's the Vicar for Strategic Planning, Monsignor Ed Scharfenberger. Welcome back to Currents. We just heard reaction from parishioners at Our Lady of Montserrat. It's one of 2 church buildings in the Brooklyn Diocese scheduled to be closed in January. Well, here now to put the closings into context is Monsignor Ed Scharfenberger. He's the vicar for the Diocese of Brooklyn. Monsignor, thank you very much for being here.
My pleasure.
Well, of course, things got a little emotional yesterday. We want to play just a quick clip from the piece there from Our Lady of Montserrat. I want to get your response to this. If we could, let's have a look at this now.
What can we do to keep this building open?
Open your books to this church. Why do you refuse?
Él ha sido el que ha manejado toda la finanza de esta parroquia y ha hecho lo que le da la gana con la finanza de esta parroquia. Escrito en el reporte de las finanzas, ahí está. Es un libro abierto.
Of course, as you can see there, Monsignor, a very emotional time at Our Lady of Montserrat yesterday. What's your reaction to seeing that video?
Well, first of all, it's not the first time I saw that because I was actually there and I was the one that was fielding those questions. And I felt the concern, I felt the emotion, I felt the passion of the people for many, many different reasons, because the prospect of this church closing has an effect, a profound effect on people for different reasons. Those that have been there for a long time, you know, those who are heavily involved in the activities. Let me give you a little perspective right here now. This is a church site that is one of 2 church sites of an already merged parish, which is All Saints Parish. And so what is being closed on January 31st is Our Lady of Montserrat, which is one of the 2 church sites of this parish. However, as I said to the people and as I tried to respond, that the church is always more than a building. As strongly as our attachment is to a building, it is the community. It's a living organism. And it's quite clear that the people who have felt that Our Lady of Montserrat is really their spiritual home, need to feel a sense of being at home in the parish of All Saints, you know, because that basically is what they're being asked to do, is to move their worship site into the larger church of All Saints. Now, my hope would be that in some way bridges can be built so that the good work that this good group of people is doing, reaching out to the youth and reaching out to people who obviously find the liturgies there very, very uplifting, that will be able to continue, even though it may be in a different venue, the parish down the street a bit.
Well, the youth outreach was one part of,
Yes.
I think, a lot of people's concerns about
and
what's going on there.
And that God willing, will continue, because the people who are involved in that, the good parishioners that are involved in that, that is a good work, and the young people will still be there. Nobody is being asked to leave All Saints Parish. And so even though it's painful to move into a different setting, you know, some way of being able to continue that ministry, it's essential. We want that to continue.
And they also had some other concerns as well, and we just want to play for you really quickly just some more kind of one-on-one reaction that we have from them. Take a look at this and we'll get your reaction to that as well.
If this church closes, then my son is going to be lost. He's going to be lost because he's not going to believe.
Under the guise of saying that there's a financial situation going on in the church, that they've also are using that opportunity to really shut down churches that they want to shut down.
There's a lot of elderly people that attend Mass here, and it's a shame for us to be scattered all over the place with no direction.
This is the only place the youth in this neighborhood has any kind of a hope.
Well, you can see there, of course, some of those concerns. What would you say to those?
Well, several concerns were expressed, certainly outreach to youth being one of them. The elderly, the accessibility of that particular site for the church, and as well as the finances, the transparency of the finances. So addressing them in the order in which they were raised. Certainly the youth, in my view, will be very, very much dependent upon the leadership of the adults and those that already have a good relationship with them. And the extent to which the adults, in my view, are able to deal with this change, which is a very significant change in the life of this parish community. To that extent, the youth will be encouraged to follow. In other words, if the same leadership and the same outreach that has been able to develop the youth in this parish can continue without breaking those bonds, it'll be a spiritual journey for them. You know, it'll be a spiritual voyage moving from one venue into the other venue, but hopefully that relationship will be maintained. We have to keep in mind that, you know, as I said to the people, you are the church, the people is church. Now, as far as the transparency of the finances, that truly is an open book. And as the pastor did explain, that anybody who is interested in knowing more about the parish finances are welcome to approach him and the parish accountant, who obviously is the one that's professionally responsible, and the diocese is aware of this. So I have to say, having been on the commission that made the decision, that every decision that was made was based upon the data that we had, both financially as well as pastorally. So there was no priority given to any parish or any region of the diocese whatsoever.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, of course, we woke up this morning to seeing this on the front page of the New York Daily News. Praying Politics was the headline, and it's actually about the Brooklyn Diocese and about some accusations that have kind of been made about perhaps Assemblyman Vito Lopez having something to do with the closing of specific parishes, and you know, saying that he's very sort of politically close to Bishop DiMarzio, and that relationship has now bitten these parishes in their closings. What would you say? What's your reaction to this story?
My main reaction is that these are allegations that are certainly unsubstantiated. There's no evidence at all in the article of any basis for any of these accusations. People may have strong feelings about certain politicians, but that doesn't necessarily translate into influence these politicians would have over the process. And I can tell you from being intimately involved in the process itself that there was absolutely no input into this process from anybody outside of the church itself and people who were representatives of the local communities. And no factors were taken into account other than factors that we were looking at the Planning Commission. It was from beginning to end completely guided by the leadership of the Planning Commission. So how these types of allegations are made, I can only speculate, and I won't. You know, but I would just demand that whoever makes them produce the evidence.
Sure. Absolutely. Well, Monsignor, we're just out of time, but thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate you taking some time to talk to us about something that's very important in the diocese and that is really affecting a lot of people.
My pleasure.
Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, stay tuned. There's much more Currents coming up. Just ahead, more details on the investigation of the church in Ireland. We'll have that and the rest of the day's headlines.
Welcome back to Currents. I'm Francesca Maxime.
And I'm Matt McClure. Just ahead, they fled their homeland 50 years ago. Now a group of Cubans reunite.
But first, let's have a look at the day's headlines. Cardinal Francis George used his final address as president of the U.S. Bishops' Conference to defend the bishops' opposition to the healthcare reform bill. George said the back and forth earlier this year was a wound to the church's unity. The cardinal said developments since the bill was first passed confirmed that the bishop's analysis of it was correct. He did not go into further details on that point. Cardinal George said the debate also raised the question of who speaks for the Catholic Church. He said in his speech that the bishops speak for the Church in matters of faith and moral issues, and all the rest is opinion. Turning now to Iraq, 26 people injured in an attack on a Catholic cathedral have been brought to Rome for emergency treatment. The victims were flown by military aircraft after an appeal by the Vatican Secretary of State. Reports say as many as 68 people were killed and 70 others injured in the attack at the cathedral more than 2 weeks ago. It was the deadliest attack on Christians since the war in Iraq began. From England, the church there is set to announce some 50 Anglican priests are heading to Rome. Well, not literally, though. The priests, including 5 bishops, will reportedly convert to Catholicism early next year. Hundreds of Anglican laypeople are expected to also join them in the new ordinariate.
Well, elsewhere in the UK, the Vatican's investigation of the church in Ireland is now underway. We get details from Rome Reports.
9 apostolic visitators appointed by Pope Benedict are currently carrying out their work in Ireland to ensure the church efforts there are successful in preventing future abuse. They're working to verify the effectiveness of initiatives undertaken to deal with psychological abuse or physical and sexual abuse committed by priests and religious between 1975 and 2004. There are 4 visitators for the archdioceses, 1 for seminaries, and 4 others for religious institutions. The apostolic visitators, or inspectors, sent by the Pope must finish their work by mid-April 2011 to evaluate the effectiveness of the present procedures in place to deal with cases of abuse and to provide assistance to the victims. Their work is not an investigation into individual cases of abuse or of assessing past events. The 4 visitators meeting in the dioceses will meet with any abuse victims who request it. New York's Archbishop Timothy Dolan, in charge of visiting Ireland's seminaries, will meet personally with each seminarian, teacher, and priest ordained in the last 3 years. 4 other visitators will investigate the situation in religious houses, convents, and monasteries. In May 2011, the Vatican will publish the results of the visit and suggest a plan for the Church in Ireland. The visit is part of the Pope's request to the bishops of Ireland in February 2010, when he called on them to address the problems of the past with determination and resolve, as well as honesty and courage.
Well, from Saudi Arabia, nearly 3 million Muslims performed the annual Hajj pilgrimage today. Muslims believe that today the doors of heaven open to answer prayers and grant forgiveness. The Hajj pilgrimage includes a climbing of Mount Arafat, which is required by every able-bodied Muslim at least once in their life. Mount Arafat is the place where Muhammad gave his final sermon. And back in this country, a U.S. appeals court has upheld the constitutionality of reciting the Pledge of Allegiance in New Hampshire's public schools. The Freedom from Religion Foundation filed a lawsuit on behalf of 2 parents, an atheist and an agnostic, who have children in that school. At issue was New Hampshire's School Patriot Act, which requires public schools to set aside time each day for students to recite the pledge with the words "under God" included. Students who do not want to say it are allowed to stand silently or to remain seated.
Well, stay tuned. There's much more current straight ahead.
When we return, Cubans who realized their dreams of freedom reunite after 50 years.
I did some praying and I said to myself, you know what? This is going to be tough.
Well, finally tonight, a story of a dramatic reunion that many people thought might never happen. 50 years ago, many young Cubans fled Fidel Castro's communist regime and came to the United States. They left everything, including their families, behind.
And their dear friends, too. But this weekend, some of these exiles from what was called Operation Peter Pan, or Pedro Pan, reunited in Florida for the very first time since childhood. The story from Christina Puig.
Some 200 exiled Cubans, many now in their 60s, were reunited for the first time since childhood.
Did you recognize each other?
Immediately.
And
I
what was
called
it
her
like?
name, Teresita, and that's it.
They all escaped Fidel Castro's communist regime as part of a rescue mission aptly called Operation Peter Pan that brought them to the United States 50 years ago.
I was going to be sent to Russia. So I got out of Cuba and went to Florida City. I was there for 3 years.
In 1960, the exodus of some 14,000 Cuban children was planned by the Catholic Church of Miami and the U.S. government with the consent of their parents. 5 decades later, aboard 3 buses, some of them sang camp songs as they were transported to tour the refugee camps that once housed them.
Okay, guys, here's Kendall.
Some of the pictures that I have, you can see it was a lot of pines, but Hurricane Andrew completely cleaned this area from the pines. I remember going over to the pines and I cry a lot.
At age 16, Juan Pujol knew then that he had to grow up quickly at Camp Metacumbe.
I did some praying and I said to myself, you know what? This is going to be tough. You're going to be on your own. So put your act together and move on.
As a teacher at Camp Kendall, Maria Gonzalez Pita says the children were well behaved, despite the suffering they experienced being separated from their families.
And we never have any problem, any discipline problems with them. I don't remember to have to send one to the office, never.
Florida City was the largest of Operation Pedro Pan's shelters. Approximately 3,000 teenage boys and girls were housed here between 1961 and 1965. Many of them were eventually relocated to foster homes throughout the United States.
And then when it came my turn to leave the camp for good and go someplace else, it was a very traumatic experience because we grew up as brothers and sisters.
Many waited years to be reunited with their parents. Some never were. Today they exchange pictures, anecdotes, and hugs.
It's been very special because the bond that was created in those years will remain with us forever.
Nice to see smiles on so many faces there years and years later.
I know, and they recognized each other. I mean, she knew who her friend was, even though there was a bunch of other people there, and even though it had been forever since they'd seen each other.
Right, just immediately, you know, oh, that's you, you know. We live in this social media world now, you know, and of course we have Facebook and all that, and somebody will add me on Facebook, and we'll have, like, all of our friends in common will be, like, from high school. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I'll say, oh, well, I went to high school with this person, but it'll take me a while to actually figure out who they are, you know?
Well, the people look a little different. It's funny, I had one of those experiences the other day, this girl named Wendy Perry that I went to high school with. You know, she was really cute in high school, and I said, oh, that's the one from high school. You know, she wanted to be my friend or something like that, or she was my friend or my fan or something like that. But anyway, the point is of this reunion is that they still recognize each other, and they went through that tough experience together, which I think really kind of bonded them in a way that just sort of being together doesn't necessarily do.
You have you go through a traumatic, a life-changing thing like that, and the experience really, it does bond you.
Indeed.
Absolutely. Well, we'll have more on what's happening in Cuba coming up on tomorrow's show. We'll speak with Miami's Archbishop Thomas Wensky, who just returned from a visit there.
Well, that is it for tonight. Remember, we're always online at currentsny.net, and you can also find us on Facebook, and maybe your high school friends too, on Twitter. And if you have a story idea, drop us a line at, our email address is currentsny@currentsny.net. Until next time, I'm Francesca Maxime.
And I'm Matt McClure. Thanks so much for joining us. Have a great night.